In a letter to MPs, Mr Johnson said he'd end this parliamentary session in September and start a new one on October the 14th.
We are going to have a Queen's speech.
Hardly unheard of.
And we're going to do it on October the 14th. And we've got to move ahead now with a new legislative programme.
Prime Minister, to do that Queen's speech, you will need to prorogue Parliament for several days. Your critics will say this is an insult to democracy and denying the MPs the time they need to debate and possibly vote on Brexit.
No.
It's very bizarre what's going on here. He's only suspending Parliament, to my knowledge, for an extra 4 days. And yet the narrative from the media, as well as the proverbial Remainer crybaby politicians, would have you believe he's intending to prorogue Parliament until way after the 31st of October to ensure no deal goes through. Of course then, there would be justification for their outcry, albeit I wouldn't exactly sympathise. Seems to me more likely that Boris Johnson has ulterior motives. Maybe the intention to force or pressurise Parliament potentially into accepting Theresa May's shit deal with the backstop magically removed, while subsequently putting a jolt of fear in the meantime into the EU's camp. That said, this isn't exactly out of the ordinary. A Queen's speech in a period of time that's usually prorogued anyway, with an extra 4 days on top, is hardly dictatorial in nature in the slightest, and it's hardly convincing if we're to believe that no deal is something he's actually prepared to go for. If he was intending to go for no deal, then he would have made sure that this extension went till after the 31st. There's plenty of time for Parliament to do what they've been doing since day one, before and after these events.
Well, that is completely untrue. If you look at what we're doing, we're bringing forward a new legislative programme on crime, on hospitals, making sure that we have the education funding that we need. And there will be ample time on both sides of that crucial October the 17th summit, ample time in Parliament for MPs to debate.
Speaker John Bercow with a very different take. This was a constitutional outrage to stop Parliament debating Brexit, an action against democratic process and the rights of MPs. But Jacob Rees-Mogg, returning to Westminster having delivered Mr Johnson's request to the Queen, insists there's nothing undemocratic about it.
So they wouldn't know what they were talking about. It's normal functioning of our constitution.
Her Majesty ordering Parliament to be prorogued, but opposition MPs vowing to fight Mr Johnson tooth and nail.
And this is exactly the point. Is this hysteria all deliberate? To perpetuate a narrative that this is in fact akin to a dictatorship, insist that it's all anti-democratic and so on and so forth, to then swoop in with the vote of no confidence to which the media will present as somewhat justified in light of all the aforementioned. Too early to say at this point, but it's ridiculous nonetheless. That said, so is the actions of the crybaby Remainers. The fucking irony, of course, in all of this is the fact that if Boris Johnson in theory had prorogued Parliament till after the 31st of October, it would have been mainly down to the actions of the crybaby Remainers, who are now up in arms as per usual, as they've done nothing with their time other than try their damnedest from day one to thwart, scupper, block and or reverse Brexit, even meeting up the day prior to this to formulate more schemes and agreements and so on, justifying their bullshit with the excuse that it's merely trying to prevent no deal from occurring, hiding behind the excuse about the potential calamity of a no deal. Thus, all they're doing is simply trying to prevent that from occurring. We all know the true intentions behind what they're doing. It's pretty obvious at this point. Some have gone so far as to admit it outright, including Chubcakes here. You know, if no deal was to be prevented, it would stand to reason then that there would be no incentive whatsoever for the EU to even consider renegotiating at all in the slightest, thus rendering Brexit near enough obsolete in terms of moving forward, meaning at some point down the line it would either have to go back to the people with a referendum that would heavily favour their BS and or revoking Article 50 in its entirety. It all begins with no deal being blocked. Hence why they're doing this. They've got a great thing going currently, just constantly spinning everybody a line about the constant fear porn hysteria about the damages and the catastrophe that awaits us all in regards to a no-deal Brexit. It's remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. These politicians who've done nothing other than cry, like benign infants, since day one. Soft Brexit was the first thing that they started greeting about as a means of compromise, to then demanding a people's vote for the best part of a year and a half, looking like a shower of anti-democratic arseholes in the process. Then, as if by magic, Theresa May began her dithering out of her debt routine, giving these people the ammunition that they needed to appear plausible. These people, thanks to Theresa May's actions, just stand there and insist it's the people they're thinking of, pointing to the mess that we're currently in as a point prover. Remove Theresa May's actions from the equation, or rewind to before Theresa May starting her shit, and they just appear like a bunch of anti-democratic pieces of excrement. Fast forward to where we are currently, and they look like they're justified in what they're doing. But they're not really, when it's all said and done.
Running short on time, but MPs believe they have options. Challenges in the courts, emergency legislation in the Commons, setting up an alternative parliament, and the nuclear option of passing a vote of no confidence in Mr Johnson's government.
All things that we know for a fact would have been discussed and considered long before Boris Johnson ever gave them an excuse to act upon said considerations.
Shutting down Parliament in order to force through a no-deal Brexit, which will do untold and lasting damage to the country against the wishes of MPs, is not democracy, it's dictatorship. And if MPs don't come together next week to stop Boris Johnson in his tracks, then I think today will go down in history as the day UK democracy died. This simply can't be allowed to happen.
But supporters of the UK government are saying it's not about stopping a no-deal Brexit. Actually, we're only losing about 4 days of Parliament
Precisely.
sitting, and Boris Johnson was saying there'll be ample time when Parliament returns.
Before and after.
Well, everybody knows that is typical Boris Johnson nonsense.
And everybody knows that's typical Sturgeon nonsense.
I listened to him this morning and I've rarely heard a flimsier or more transparent cover story. You know, even
What is he trying to hide exactly? If he intended to force through a no-deal Brexit, then he would have made sure that this extension that everybody's in a tizzy over would have gone over the 31st of October. But as it stands, he's not. It's 4 days on top of a period of time that Parliament wouldn't have been in anyway.
Even the Speaker of the House of Commons is calling this an outrageous attack on democracy.
And what fucking relevancy is John Bercow to this scenario in any way whatsoever? He's about as relevant as saying that even Beta Blackford is calling this an outrageous attack on democracy. Bercow is a staunch Remainer, just the same as you are.
Everybody knows what this is about. It's about restricting any ability
To fucking stop Brexit.
Parliament has to stop a no-deal Brexit
You mean stop Brexit?
in its